Ambassador Crixtal adjusted her crystalline communication device as she prepared for what would become the most important diplomatic meeting in galactic history. The Terran delegation had arrived 3 cycles ago, and their strange behavior continued to puzzle the entire Galactic Council. The humans sat quietly in the corner of the massive council chamber, wearing simple gray uniforms that looked almost primitive compared to the elaborate biosuits and energy armor worn by other species. Their leader, a woman named Sarah Chen, had politely declined the traditional warrior's welcome and instead asked for a simple handshake and maybe some coffee. Crixtal's 4 eyes focused on the human delegation as Council Speaker Vorthon began the session. The Zephyrians floated in their gravity-defying spheres, their tentacles dancing with electrical energy. The Kronos warriors stood in perfect formation, their metal exoskeletons gleaming under the chamber's plasma lights. The ethereal collective's representatives phased in and out of visible reality, their consciousness barely contained in their energy forms. And then there were the humans, sitting, waiting, taking notes with primitive writing instruments on actual paper. "The matter before us today," Vorthon announced, his voice booming across the chamber through quantum resonance, "is the application of the species known as humans for membership in the Galactic Council. As per protocol, they must demonstrate their technological advancement and military capability." Sarah Chen stood up slowly, smoothing down her simple uniform. She carried what appeared to be a leather briefcase, an artifact so ancient that most species had forgotten such things ever existed. "Honored council members," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly without any technological amplification. "We appreciate this opportunity to present our case. We understand that membership requires demonstration of advanced capabilities." Crixtal noticed that several council members were already looking bored. The Titanforge Collective's representative, a massive being of living metal and crystal, actually seemed to be entering a dormant state. Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a small, unremarkable device about the size of her palm. It looked like polished metal with a few simple buttons. "This is our quantum communication array," Sarah said, holding up the device. "It allows instant communication across any distance in the universe." The chamber erupted in clicks, chirps, and electronic buzzes as the various species communicated their amusement. The Zephyrian's leader floated forward, tentacles crackling with condescending energy. "Honored human," the Zephyrian spoke through bioelectric pulses. "Our quantum communicators are the size of buildings and require the energy output of 3 stars to function across galactic distances. Your small device is clearly primitive radio technology." Sarah nodded politely. "I understand your skepticism. Would you like a demonstration?" Before anyone could respond, Sarah pressed a button on the device. Suddenly, every communication system in the chamber activated simultaneously. Messages began pouring in from every corner of the galaxy, all speaking in perfect translation to each species present. "Greetings, Galactic Council. This is Admiral Thompson from the human exploration vessel Discovery, currently in the Andromeda Galaxy. We're receiving your signal perfectly. Also, beautiful chamber, by the way. The architectural style really brings out the cosmic background radiation." The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Sarah pressed another button. "This is Dr. Rodriguez from Research Station Alpha, currently studying the black hole at the center of the Milky Way. The quantum entanglement is working flawlessly from here as well. Sarah, don't forget to mention our new propulsion system." Crixtal's crystalline structure began to resonate with uncertainty. She had helped design the Council's quantum communication network, and it required massive installations and enormous power sources. The human device was impossibly small. How? Vorthon's voice had lost its commanding boom and now carried a note of genuine curiosity. Sarah smiled, an expression that Crixtal was beginning to recognize as distinctly human. We discovered that consciousness itself creates quantum entanglement. We don't fight the universe's laws, we work with them. Every human is naturally quantum entangled with every other human. We just built devices that amplify this natural connection. The Kronos military commander, General Thaxmore, stepped forward with a metallic clang. Interesting parlor trick, human. But what of military capability? The galaxy is dangerous. How do you protect yourselves? Sarah reached into her briefcase again and pulled out what looked like a small metal sphere, about the size of a marble. This is our standard defensive system, she said, placing it gently on the podium. General Thaxmore's optical sensors focused on the tiny sphere. That is your weapon? Not exactly a weapon, Sarah replied. More like a shield. It creates a protective field that adapts to any threat. The general's laugh sounded like grinding metal. Our plasma cannons can level mountains. Our void torpedoes can crack planets. What could your tiny sphere possibly do against such power? Well, Sarah said thoughtfully, why don't you try to attack me with something? The chamber's security systems immediately activated, creating energy barriers between the species. This was highly irregular, but General Thaxmore was known for his aggressive demonstrations. I will use only a minor plasma discharge, the general announced, enough to demonstrate the futility of human technology. He raised his arm cannon, a weapon that integrated seamlessly with his exoskeleton. Energy began building in the weapon's core, creating a bright blue glow that illuminated the chamber. Sarah stood calmly next to her tiny sphere, hands clasped behind her back. The general fired. A concentrated beam of plasma energy shot towards Sarah, enough to vaporize most organic matter instantly. The beam simply stopped 3 feet from Sarah's position. It didn't hit a barrier or get absorbed by a shield. It just stopped, as if it had encountered something that it couldn't quite process. Then, something extraordinary happened. The beam slowly reversed direction and traveled back toward the general, but as it moved, it began to change. The destructive plasma energy transformed into something else entirely, becoming a warm, golden light that settled around the general like a comfortable blanket. For the first time in recorded history, General Thaxmore's aggressive posture relaxed. His weapon powered down automatically. I feel, the general said slowly, his mechanical voice carrying notes of wonder, peaceful. Sarah picked up her sphere and returned it to her briefcase. The field doesn't destroy or deflect attacks. It understands the intent behind them and transforms that intent into something beneficial. Anger becomes peace. Hatred becomes understanding. Violence becomes healing. Krixtal's 4 eyes were now focused entirely on the human delegation. Around the chamber, representatives from the most advanced species in the galaxy were staring in silence. There must be some scientific explanation, the ethereal collective's representative whispered, their consciousness flickering with uncertainty. What technology could possibly achieve such a thing? Sarah sat back down and opened her briefcase once more. This time she pulled out what appeared to be a children's drawing, complete with crayon marks and stick figures. My daughter Emma drew this for me before I left Earth, Sarah said, holding up the drawing. It shows our family having a picnic under our sun. She wrote, "Love you, Mommy," at the bottom. She looked around the chamber at the confused faces of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The technology isn't in the devices, Sarah continued. The devices just help us focus what was already there. Humans discovered long ago that the universe responds to consciousness, to intention, to love. We don't build our technology to dominate or control. We build it to connect, to understand, to care. Krixtal found herself moving closer to the human delegation, drawn by something she couldn't quite identify. But surely, Vorthan said, his voice now much quieter, you must have conventional weapons for true threats. There are forces in the universe that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be transformed. Sarah nodded seriously. You're absolutely right. There are times when protection requires more direct action. She reached into her briefcase one final time and pulled out what looked like a simple pen. "This is our ultimate weapon," she said, clicking the pen once. The chamber's sensors immediately went haywire. Every detection system, every scanner, every analysis device began displaying readings that made no logical sense. "According to your instruments," Sarah said calmly, "this pen is simultaneously a supernova, a black hole, the birth of a universe, and a cup of tea. Your systems can't process what they're detecting because they're trying to measure something that exists outside the normal parameters of reality." She clicked the pen again, and all the sensors returned to normal readings. "How is this possible?" Krikstal heard herself asking, her crystalline voice ringing with genuine curiosity rather than diplomatic protocol. Sarah smiled again, and this time Krikstal noticed that the human's expression seemed to make the chamber itself feel warmer somehow. "We learn to write reality," Sarah said simply. "Not rewrite it, not overwrite it, but write new chapters in it. This pen doesn't contain destructive force. It contains creative force. It writes new possibilities into existence." She demonstrated by clicking the pen and writing something in the air. Where her pen moved, actual words appeared, glowing softly in three-dimensional space. Today, the Galactic Council discovered that power isn't about the size of your weapons or the complexity of your technology. Power is about understanding that the universe is fundamentally creative, not destructive. It wants to grow, to expand, to become more than it was. The glowing words hung in the air, and Krikstal realized that she could read them perfectly, even though they were written in a human language she had never seen before. More than that, she felt their truth resonating through her crystalline structure. General Thaxmore stepped forward again, but this time his movements were careful, almost reverent. "Human Sarah," he said, his mechanical voice soft. "If you possess such capabilities, why did you come here seeking membership? You could simply take what you want." Sarah's expression grew sad for a moment. "Because taking isn't the point, General. Growing together is the point. We came here because we believe that every species, every consciousness in this galaxy has something unique and beautiful to contribute. We don't want to be rulers or leaders. We want to be friends." She gestured around the chamber at all the different species present. "Look at what we have here. The Zephyrians understand energy manipulation in ways that dance between science and art. The Kronos military has perfected the balance between strength and honor. The Ethereal Collective has mastered the exploration of consciousness itself. Krikstal's people have created technologies that sing with crystalline harmony." Krikstal started when Sarah mentioned her by name, realizing that the human had somehow learned not just her name, but something about her people's approach to technology. "We don't want to replace any of that," Sarah continued. "We want to learn from it, to share with it, to grow alongside it. Human technology works the way it does because we believe the universe is collaborative, not competitive." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Vorthan spoke, his voice carrying a weight that Krikstal had never heard before. "Human delegation, your demonstrations have been unprecedented. The Council requires time to deliberate on your application. We will reconvene in 7 cycles." As the various delegations began to file out of the chamber, Krikstal found herself approaching the human group. Sarah looked up at her with those strange but warm human eyes. "Ambassador Krikstal," Sarah said, somehow knowing her rank as well as her name. "Would you like to join us for coffee? I brought some from Earth, and I think you might enjoy it." Krikstal's crystalline structure hummed with curiosity, and something else she couldn't quite identify, something that felt suspiciously like anticipation. "I would be honored," she replied, and meant it more than she had ever meant any diplomatic pleasantry. As they walked together toward the human delegation's modest quarters, Crixtal couldn't help but wonder what other surprises these remarkable beings had in store for the galaxy. More importantly, she found herself looking forward to finding out. Behind them, the empty council chamber still glowed faintly with the words Sarah had written in the air, continuing to pulse with a warm, creative light that seemed to whisper of infinite possibilities. Crixtal had never experienced anything quite like human coffee. The dark liquid somehow managed to stimulate her crystalline nervous system in ways that made her thoughts ring like clear bells. More surprising was the environment in which she found herself consuming it. The human quarters were nothing like the elaborate diplomatic suites provided to other species. Instead of the expected displays of technological prowess or cultural superiority, Sarah had led them to what appeared to be a simple recreation of a human living space. Soft furniture that invited relaxation, warm lighting that felt like natural starlight, and walls covered not with achievements or weapons, but with photographs. Hundreds of photographs. "These are pictures of home," Sarah explained, noticing Crixtal's interest. "Every human in our diplomatic corps brings photos of the people they care about." Crixtal moved closer to examine the images. The photographs showed humans in countless everyday situations. Families gathered around tables sharing meals. Children playing in gardens under blue skies. Elderly humans sitting together on wooden benches, their faces lined with what appeared to be contentment. Groups of humans laughing together in various settings. "I don't understand," Crixtal admitted, her voice creating harmonious chimes in the warm air. "These are not images of conquest or achievement. Where are your greatest warriors, your most advanced technologies, your monuments to power?" Sarah's teammate, a man named Dr. Marcus Webb, laughed softly as he prepared more coffee using a device that appeared to be nothing more than glass and metal, yet somehow created the perfect temperature and flavor through what seemed like pure intent. "Those are our greatest achievements," Marcus said, gesturing to the photographs. "Every one of those images represents someone choosing connection over isolation, love over fear, growth over stagnation." Another human, introduced as Engineer Rosa Santos, looked up from what appeared to be a simple tablet device. "We learned something important early in our development, Ambassador. The universe doesn't care how big your weapons are. It cares how much love you can generate." Crixtal's 4 eyes focused on Rosa's tablet. The device seemed to be running simulations, but unlike the complex holographic displays used by other species, this showed simple, elegant patterns that somehow conveyed enormous amounts of information. "May I ask what you are working on?" Crixtal inquired. Rosa smiled and turned the tablet so Crixtal could see the screen more clearly. "I'm designing a gift for your people, actually. I noticed that crystalline technology resonates at specific harmonic frequencies. I think human consciousness tech might be able to amplify those harmonics in ways that would make your existing systems more efficient." Crixtal stared at the display. Rosa was absolutely correct about crystalline harmonic frequencies. But this information was classified at the highest levels of her government. No outsider should have been able to determine these patterns, let alone understand how to enhance them. "How did you know about our harmonic resonance matrices?" Crixtal asked, her voice tight with concern. "Oh," Rosa said, looking embarrassed. "I hope I didn't overstep any boundaries. It's just that when I see how something works, I instinctively want to help it work better. Your crystalline structure is absolutely beautiful, and I could hear it singing when you were excited about something during the council meeting." "Singing?" Crixtal repeated. Sarah set down her coffee cup and looked at Crixtal with those remarkably warm human eyes. "One of the things humans discovered early is that consciousness creates harmonies. When someone is truly happy, truly excited, truly engaged, they generate patterns that resonate with everything around them. Rosa has always been able to hear those patterns." "I don't just hear them," Rosa added, her fingers dancing across the tablet surface as new patterns appeared. I can compose with them. It's like reality is this enormous symphony, and every consciousness is an instrument. Most species play solo pieces, which are beautiful, but imagine what we could create if we all played together. She touched a control on her tablet, and suddenly the room filled with the most beautiful sound Krixtal had ever experienced. It wasn't music in any traditional sense, but rather a harmony that seemed to come from the resonance between different types of consciousness present in the room. Krixtal could hear her own crystalline frequency, but woven together with distinctly human harmonics that somehow made her own patterns richer and more complex. "This is impossible," Krixtal whispered, but even as she said it, she could feel her entire crystalline matrix responding to the harmonic integration. She felt more alert, more creative, more alive than she had in cycles. Dr. Webb leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "Ambassador, can I share something with you? Something that might help explain why humans seem to act like we're not the most advanced species?" Krixtal nodded, not trusting her voice, as Rosa's harmonic composition continued to enhance her thought processes. "We are the most advanced species," Marcus said simply. "At least in terms of pure technological capability. We figured that out about 200 years ago. We could build weapons that unmake reality itself. We could construct vessels that travel not just through space, but between universes. We could manipulate matter and energy at levels that would make godlike beings nervous." He paused to take a sip of coffee, and Krixtal noticed that the liquid in his cup seemed to swirl with tiny galaxies. "But we also figured out something else," Marcus continued. "Being the most powerful doesn't make you the most important. Being able to destroy everything doesn't make you wise. Having ultimate technology doesn't make you happy." Sarah nodded and pulled another photograph from the wall. This one showed a massive human city, but unlike the typical displays of urban power, this image captured something else entirely. The buildings seemed to grow rather than being constructed, spiraling up toward the sky in organic curves. Between them, gardens and parks created green spaces where humans and various Earth creatures coexisted peacefully. "This is New Geneva," Sarah said, showing Krixtal the photograph. "It's our newest city, built entirely with consciousness-guided technology. The buildings grow themselves based on the needs and dreams of the people who will live in them. The transportation system reads the intent of travelers and takes them where they need to go, not necessarily where they ask to go." "What do you mean?" Krixtal asked, fascinated despite her confusion. Rosa looked up from her tablet with excitement. "It means the city is alive in a way. It understands the difference between what people want and what they actually need. Someone might ask to go to a shopping district because they're feeling lonely, but the transportation system recognizes the real need and instead takes them to a community center where they meet new friends. The city cares about its inhabitants," Marcus added. "It wants them to be genuinely happy, not just temporarily satisfied." Krixtal felt something shifting in her understanding of these humans. "You've created artificial intelligence that surpasses your own capabilities?" Sarah shook her head gently. "Not artificial intelligence, Ambassador. Collaborative intelligence. The city isn't separate from its inhabitants. It's an expression of their collective consciousness, guided by their highest aspirations rather than their immediate desires." She stood up and walked to a window that looked out over the council station's docking area. Krixtal could see the human ship, a modest vessel that looked almost primitive compared to the massive battle cruisers and exploration platforms of other species. "Would you like to see our ship?" Sarah asked. Krixtal's crystalline structure hummed with curiosity. "I would be honored." As they made their way through the station's corridors toward the docking bay, Krixtal noticed that other beings seemed to react differently to the human delegation. Where before there had been dismissive glances or casual ignoring, now various species watched the humans with expressions of puzzled respect. General Thaxmore appeared as they approached the docking bay. His massive exoskeleton had been modified since the morning's council session, and Crixtal was startled to see that the modifications appeared to be decorative rather than functional. Intricate patterns had been etched into the metal, and the overall effect was surprisingly artistic. "Human Sarah," the general said, his mechanical voice carrying notes of something Crixtal had never heard from a Kronos warrior before. Something that might have been joy. "I wanted to thank you for this morning's demonstration." Sarah smiled. "How are you feeling, General?" "Different," Thaxmore replied, and Crixtal could hear the wonder in his voice. "For the first time in my existence, I understand the difference between strength and force. Strength builds, force destroys. I have been very strong today." He gestured to the decorative patterns on his exoskeleton. "I found myself creating beauty instead of planning destruction. It feels good." Rosa clapped her hands together excitedly. "Oh, General, those patterns are gorgeous. They look like they're telling a story." Thaxmore's optical sensors focused on Rosa with what appeared to be surprise. "How did you know? They do tell a story, the story of this day, when I learned that power has many forms." "Could you tell us the story?" Rosa asked, and Crixtal realized that the human's request was not mere politeness. Rosa genuinely wanted to hear what the general had to say. For the next several minutes, General Thaxmore described the meaning behind each pattern he had etched into his armor. As he spoke, something remarkable happened. Other beings began to gather around the group, drawn not by any announced event, but by something harder to define. The ethereal collective's representative materialized more fully than Crixtal had ever seen, apparently finding the general's artistic expression worthy of focused attention. Several Zephyrians floated over, their tentacles moving in patterns that Crixtal recognized as expressions of aesthetic appreciation. By the time the general finished his story, nearly 24 representatives from various species had gathered to listen. And when he concluded, something unprecedented happened in the sterile environment of a diplomatic station. They applauded, not the formal acknowledgement typical of diplomatic protocol, but genuine appreciation for beauty shared between conscious beings. Sarah waited for the applause to fade before speaking. "This is what happens when consciousness focuses on creation instead of competition," she said softly. "General Thaxmore didn't become less of a warrior today. He became a more complete one." As the crowd began to disperse, Crixtal found herself walking alongside the general toward the human ship. His heavy steps had a different rhythm now, less martial march and more purposeful stride. "Ambassador Crixtal," the general said, "I wanted to ask you something. Do you think the Council will approve humanity's membership?" Crixtal considered the question carefully. "I think, General, that the real question is whether the Council is ready for what humanity's membership would mean." They reached the human ship, and Crixtal had to stop and stare. Up close, the vessel looked even less impressive than it had from a distance. The hull appeared to be made of simple metal alloy, with no visible weapons systems, no energy shields, no obvious propulsion mechanisms. "This is your interstellar vessel?" she asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. Marcus grinned. "This is our favorite ship, actually. Her name is Hope, and she's been with us for about 50 years now." 50 years? Crixtal repeated. "How is that possible? Interstellar travel requires enormous energy expenditures. Your ship should have worn out decades ago." Sarah placed her hand gently on the ship's hull, and Crixtal could swear she saw a faint glow spread from the point of contact. "Hope doesn't age the way other ships do," Sarah explained. "She's not just a machine. She's a partner. Every human who has ever traveled on her has left something behind. Memories, dreams, intentions. She's grown stronger and more capable over time, not weaker. As if responding to Sarah's words, a gentle hum began to emanate from the ship's hull. It wasn't the sound of engines or mechanical systems, but something warmer, more organic. "She's singing," Rosa said with delight. "She's happy to see us." General Thaxmore stepped closer to the hull, his sensors focused intently on the ship's surface. "I'm detecting massive energy patterns, but they don't match any known technology. What powers this vessel?" Sarah's smile grew wider. "Love, General. Hope runs on love." 7 cycles later, the Galactic Council chamber had been transformed. What had previously been a formal space designed to showcase power and authority now hummed with anticipation and something harder to define. Crixtal noticed that many representatives had made subtle changes to their appearance or equipment since the humans' initial presentation. General Thaxmore's armor now displayed intricate artistic patterns across its entire surface, telling stories of strength used for creation rather than destruction. The Zephyrians had modified their floating spheres to generate soft, harmonious light patterns that seemed to dance with their tentacle movements. Even the usually austere ethereal collective had maintained fuller manifestation, their consciousness forms shimmering with what appeared to be curiosity. Crixtal herself had spent the intervening cycles in a state of constant resonance, her crystalline structure singing softly as she contemplated everything she had learned about humanity. The harmonic patterns Rosa had shown her had opened new possibilities in crystalline technology that her people had never imagined. As Council Speaker Vorthan called the session to order, Crixtal noticed that his usual commanding presence had been tempered with something that looked remarkably like excitement. "The Council has completed its deliberations regarding humanity's application for membership," Vorthan announced. "However, before we announce our decision, we have questions for the human delegation." Sarah Chen stood with the same quiet dignity she had displayed at their first meeting, but Crixtal's enhanced perception could now detect the harmonic patterns Rosa had taught her to recognize. Sarah radiated calm confidence, but underlying that was genuine care for the outcome and deep affection for the assembled beings. "We are prepared to answer any questions the Council may have," Sarah replied. Vorthan gestured to the ethereal collective's representative, whose consciousness form solidified into something approaching a recognizable shape. "Human delegation," the ethereal being's voice echoed with overtones that suggested deep contemplation. "We have spent considerable time analyzing the demonstrations you provided. Our question is this: if humanity possesses such advanced capabilities, why do you continue to present yourselves as a developing species?" Sarah exchanged glances with her teammates before responding. "Because we are a developing species. All conscious beings are developing species. The moment we believe we've finished growing, we stop growing." She walked to the center of the chamber, her simple gray uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate displays surrounding her. "We've learned that advancement isn't about reaching a destination," Sarah continued. "It's about choosing to keep walking the path of growth, even when you could stop and declare yourself finished." Marcus stepped forward, carrying what appeared to be a simple wooden box. "May I show the Council something?" At Vorthan's nod, Marcus opened the box and carefully removed what looked like a seed. Not a technological device designed to resemble a seed, but an actual organic seed from Earth. "This is from an oak tree that grew in my grandmother's garden," Marcus said, holding the seed so the chamber's sensors could examine it. "According to your instruments, this is just biological matter, simple, primitive, unremarkable." He placed the seed on the central platform and stepped back. "But that seed contains within it the potential to become something magnificent. Not just a tree, but a living being that will provide oxygen, shelter, and beauty for hundreds of years. It will support ecosystems, weather storms, and continue growing for longer than most civilizations exist." The seed began to glow softly, though no one had activated any technology. Consciousness works the same way, Marcus continued. Every being in this chamber is like that seed. You contain infinite potential for growth, for beauty, for connection. Humans learned that our job isn't to replace natural processes or to declare ourselves above them. Our job is to provide the conditions for growth. As he spoke, something extraordinary began to happen. The seed on the platform started to grow. Not quickly, not dramatically, but visibly. A tiny green shoot emerged, followed by the first leaves. "Impossible," whispered the Titan Forge Collective's representative. "Biological processes don't function at that rate without massive technological intervention." Rosa laughed, a sound that somehow made the chamber itself feel warmer. "We're not forcing it to grow faster. We're just providing it with perfect conditions, the right amount of care, the right intention, the right environment. When you give a living thing exactly what it needs, it grows at the pace that's natural for it." The tiny oak continued its accelerated but natural growth, and Crixtall realized that the plant was responding to something in the chamber's atmosphere that hadn't been there before. The various species present were unconsciously generating the conditions the seed needed, guided by human consciousness technology that helped them focus their intentions. General Thaxmore stepped forward, his artistic armor gleaming under the chamber's lights. "Are you saying that human technology enhances the natural capabilities of other species?" Sarah nodded. "Our technology doesn't replace other consciousness. It harmonizes with it. We discovered that the universe is fundamentally collaborative. Every conscious being adds something unique to the total symphony of existence." She gestured around the chamber. "Look what's happening right now. The Zephyrian's energy manipulation, the crystalline harmonic resonance, the ethereal consciousness expansion, the Chronos focus and determination, the Titan Forge stability and structure. All of these different approaches to consciousness are working together to help this seed grow." The oak sapling, now about a foot tall, was indeed thriving in the combined attention of multiple species. Its leaves showed patterns that reflected the various types of consciousness focused on it, creating a living artwork that captured the essence of each species present. Vorthan's voice had lost its formal tone entirely. "What you're suggesting is that advancement isn't about individual species becoming more powerful. It's about multiple species learning to work together." "Exactly," Sarah replied. "And that's why we present ourselves as a developing species. Because we are. Every interaction, every friendship, every collaboration teaches us something new. We could use our technology to dominate or control, but we'd stop growing if we did that." The Zephyrian leader floated forward, tentacles moving in patterns that Crixtall now recognized as artistic expression rather than mere communication. "Human delegation," the Zephyrian spoke. "We have another question. Your technology appears to be powered by positive emotions and intentions. What happens when you encounter genuinely hostile forces? Surely there are beings in the universe that cannot be reasoned with or transformed." Sarah's expression grew serious, and the chamber's atmosphere shifted subtly. The oak sapling continued to grow, but its leaves now showed more complex patterns, some of which looked like storm clouds. "You're absolutely right," Sarah admitted. "There are forces that choose destruction over creation, isolation over connection. We've encountered them." Marcus pulled another device from his pocket, this one looking like a simple compass. As he held it up, the needle began to spin wildly before pointing toward a specific direction in space. 18 months ago, we encountered the Devourers, Sarah continued, her voice heavy with memory. A species that had chosen to consume consciousness itself rather than create or collaborate. They had already absorbed 17 civilizations. The chamber fell silent, except for the gentle rustling of the oak's growing leaves. "We tried communication first, of course, then transformation, then harmony. Nothing worked. They had made a fundamental choice to exist by destroying other existence." Rosa's voice was quiet but clear. "So we stopped them. How? General Thaxmore asked, his weapons systems unconsciously beginning to power up in response to the discussion of genuine threat. Sarah looked directly at the general. We used our ultimate technology, General. The one I showed you briefly during our first presentation. She pulled out the simple pen again, but this time its presence filled the chamber with something that felt like the weight of entire universes. We didn't destroy the Devourers, Sarah said softly. We gave them a choice. She clicked the pen once, and suddenly the chamber was filled with images, not holographic projections, but actual windows into other realities. The assembled beings could see the Devourers, massive entities of living void that consumed light, consciousness, and hope itself. We wrote them a new story, Sarah continued. Not a story that overwrote their choice, but one that offered them a different choice. We showed them what they could become if they chose creation over consumption. The images shifted, showing the Devourers beginning to change. Their void-like forms started to generate light instead of consuming it. They began to create instead of destroy. Most of them chose the new story, Marcus added. They became the gardeners, using their reality manipulation abilities to help young civilizations grow and flourish. And those who didn't choose the new story? Vorthan asked. Sarah's expression was sad, but resolute. We wrote them out of this reality entirely. Not destroyed, but relocated to a reality where their choice to consume couldn't harm others. They got exactly what they wanted, an entire universe to devour, with only willing participants. She clicked the pen again, and the images faded, leaving only the growing oak tree and the profound silence of beings contemplating the implications of what they had just learned. You rewrote reality itself, the ethereal collective's representative whispered. We offered new possibilities, Sarah corrected gently. Reality is always being written by every choice every conscious being makes. We just learned how to write more consciously, more intentionally. Crixtal felt her crystalline structure resonating with understanding. These humans weren't presenting themselves as non-advanced because they lacked power. They were presenting themselves as developing because they had learned that true advancement meant using power in service of growth, rather than control. Council Speaker Vorthan stood, his massive form somehow managing to convey both authority and humility. The Council has reached its decision, he announced formally. However, we find that the question is not whether humanity should be admitted to the Council. He paused, looking around the chamber at representatives who had already begun to transform just from exposure to human consciousness technology. The question is whether we are ready to join humanity. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. I'm sorry, Speaker Vorthan. I don't understand. Vorthan gestured to the oak tree, now nearly 6 feet tall, and creating a canopy that cast gentle shadows across the chamber floor. Look around you, human Sarah. In 7 cycles, every species present has grown in ways we hadn't imagined possible. The Chronos have discovered art. The Zephyrians have learned harmony. The crystalline have found new frequencies of existence. The ethereal have discovered the joy of full manifestation. He moved closer to the human delegation, his voice carrying the weight of galactic authority, but also something much more personal. You haven't just demonstrated advanced technology, you've demonstrated advanced wisdom. The Council votes to dissolve itself and reform as something new. Not a governing body, but a collaborative one. Not a council of separate species competing for resources and influence, but a family of conscious beings choosing to grow together. The chamber erupted in sounds of approval from multiple species, but these weren't the formal acknowledgments of diplomatic protocol. These were expressions of genuine excitement, of beings who had discovered new possibilities for existence. Sarah looked around at her teammates, and Crixtal could see tears forming in the human's eyes. We would be honored to help establish such a collaboration, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. But on one condition. The chamber grew quiet. waiting. Sarah smiled through her tears and gestured to the oak tree. We all have to keep growing. No one gets to stop learning, stop expanding, stop discovering new ways to care for each other and the universe we share. General Thaxmore stepped forward, his artistic armor gleaming. I believe I speak for all present when I say that such growth would be our highest honor. One by one, representatives from every species present moved toward the oak tree. As they gathered in a circle around the growing plant, something magnificent happened. Each being began to generate their own unique harmonic frequency, but instead of competing, the frequencies wove together into a symphony that seemed to make the very fabric of space-time ring with joy. Crixtal found herself standing between Sarah and General Thaxmore, her crystalline structure singing in perfect harmony with a Kronos warrior's artistic expression and a human's conscious intention. Around them, the oak tree continued to grow, its leaves now showing patterns that captured the essence of every consciousness present. What do we call ourselves now? Rosa asked, her tablet displaying patterns that somehow managed to be both complex and beautifully simple. Sarah looked around the circle of beings who had chosen collaboration over competition, growth over dominance, love over fear. How about, she suggested with that distinctly human smile, the family. As the newly formed family continued to harmonize around the growing oak tree, Crixtal realized that this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the galaxy, other species were waiting to discover what was possible when consciousness chose creation over destruction. And for the first time in her existence, Crixtal felt truly excited about the future. The oak tree reached the chamber's ceiling and gently pushed through it, not breaking or damaging anything, but somehow creating space where space hadn't existed before. Its branches spread wide, sheltering the family gathering below, and its leaves whispered with the voices of infinite possibilities waiting to be born. In the distance, ships from worlds that had heard the harmonic resonance were already changing course, drawn by something they couldn't name but couldn't ignore. The sound of conscious beings choosing to grow together, choosing to become more than they had ever been separately. And at the center of it all, humans continued to act like they weren't the most advanced species in the galaxy, because they had learned that the moment you stop growing, you stop being truly advanced. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for someone to remember that all along.